Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of high-growth startups
Okay,
and how they use digital disruption to kind of just explode onto the scene.
right.
We're going to be looking at a framework
Yeah.
from a former Harvard Business School professor, Thales Teixeira.
Mm-hmm.
And the source for this is a really fascinating YouTube video
Mm-hmm.
where he lays out this
Yeah.
whole framework and basically
Huh.
suggests that digital disruption can be engineered.
It can.
So
Yeah,
are you ready to kind of peek behind the curtain and see
absolutely.
how companies like Uber and Airbnb did it?
Yeah, Professor Teixeira's framework is all about what he calls decoupling the customer value chain.
Okay.
And it sounds a little technical,
Yeah.
but it's a really powerful way to think about how these startups find those explosive growth opportunities.
So let's break that down.
Yeah.
What is the customer value chain?
So the customer value chain, you can imagine it as a series of connected links.
Okay.
Like a chain of paper clips. And each paper clip represents an activity that customers go through to get what they want.
Gotcha. So it's like all the steps involved
Exactly.
in the process.
Think about getting a taxi before Uber.
Okay.
You had to hail one on the street or call a dispatcher,
Right.
often with no guarantee of when a car would arrive.
Yeah.
Each of those steps is a link in the chain.
But this applies to like anything, right?
Anything.
Like just even buying a cup of coffee.
Every product and service has its own customer value chain.
Okay.
And what Professor Teixeira noticed is that disruptive startups often find that one weak link in the chain.
Okay.
That one step, that's a pain point for customers.
Uh-huh.
And they figure out how to do it better, faster, or cheaper.
So they're not necessarily creating something like totally new.
Not always.
They're looking at an existing process
Yeah,
and finding that weakest link and then almost like snapping it off and replacing it with something stronger.
that's a great way to put it. That's the decoupling part.
Gotcha.
They break that weak link and offer a superior solution, often through technology.
Okay.
Take Uber, for example.
Okay.
They saw that matching riders and drivers was inefficient
Uh-huh.
and frustrating. So they decoupled that activity
Right.
by creating an app that streamlined the entire process.
So Uber's basically like cannibalizing the taxi industry then.
Right. They're targeting a weakness in the existing taxi industry.
Okay.
And by offering a better solution,
Uh,
they were able to attract customers away from traditional taxis.
gotcha.
That's the disruptive power of decoupling.
So we've got this idea of decoupling,
Yeah.
but Professor Teixeira doesn't just stop there. He actually identifies 3 distinct types of decoupling,
Yes, he does.
and he uses the video game industry as an example to illustrate them.
It's a really clever choice because the gaming world has seen so much disruption in recent years.
For sure.
So the first type is decoupling a value-creating activity.
Oh.
And he uses the example of Twitch,
Mm-hmm.
where people can watch others play video games. So they're not taking away from the core value of playing the game.
It seems like they're adding something.
Exactly. They're adding a new layer of value
Right.
by decoupling the act of watching from the act of playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just starting to see how this works.
Yeah.
So what about the other types?
Okay, so the second type is decoupling a value-eroding activity.
Okay.
And these are the steps in the customer value chain that people find annoying or inconvenient.
Hmm.
Like, for example, buying a physical copy of a video game
Right.
and having to go to the store.
Yeah.
So Professor Teixeira uses the example of Steam,
Okay.
which is a platform where you can stream video games directly to your computer.
Yeah.
So no more trips to the store.
Right.
No more waiting in line.
I definitely remember those days of having to like rent games from Blockbuster or something.
Right.
Oh, it was such a hassle.
Huge hassle.
Yeah.
So Steam decoupled those frustrating steps by letting you access games instantly online.
Gotcha. So it's more convenient.
Faster and ultimately a more enjoyable experience for the customer.
Yeah.
Like removing the friction.
So they took a step that was actively making the experience worse
Uh-huh.
and just poof, made it disappear.
Exactly. And then we have the third type,
Okay.
decoupling a value capturing activity.
Right.
And this is where things get really interesting from a business perspective,
Okay.
because it's all about changing the way businesses make money.
Okay.
A perfect example is the freemium model,
Okay.
used by games like Fortnite.
Ah, the freemium model.
You know, where they give you the core value for free,
Right.
hoping you'll love it so much that you'll happily pay for extras later.
So they're banking on people just getting hooked
Exactly.
and then wanting more.
It's a clever model.
But isn't there that risk that
There's a huge risk.
people just play for free
Oh, yeah.
and never convert?
Absolutely. It's a risk,
Yeah.
but it hinges on the idea that a percentage of free users will become paying customers,
Okay.
enough to offset the cost of providing the free service.
Gotcha.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It sounds like it requires like a really good understanding of
Deep understanding of customer behavior.
customer behavior for
Yeah.
sure. Professor Teixeira also mentioned that venture capitalists really like companies that decouple value-creating activities.
They love it.
Why is that?
It's all about growth potential.
Yeah.
You see, when you decouple a value-creating activity,
Mhm.
you're often expanding the market. You're not just taking business away from existing players.
Okay.
You're creating something new and valuable that wasn't there before.
So you're not just like
Investors love that.
stealing market share, you're actually like growing the pie.
Exactly.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you've got this startup, they successfully disrupt the market,
Mm-hmm.
they decouple a key activity, they
Yeah.
start growing like crazy.
What happens next?
Yeah, what happens next?
Well, Professor Teixeira argues that the next stage often involves something called coupling,
Coupling.
which might sound counterintuitive, but it basically means adding new activities to the customer value chain.
So after you've like snapped off that weak
Mhm.
link
Uh-huh.
and replaced it with something stronger,
Yeah,
you start adding more links to the chain.
precisely.
Okay.
Uber is a great example of this.
Okay.
They started with just rides,
Mhm.
but then they expanded into food delivery with Uber Eats,
Right.
package delivery,
Yeah.
even freight transport.
Wow.
They're coupling new activities onto their initial disruption.
So it's like they establish that beachhead
Exactly.
with that initial disruption.
Yeah,
And then they kind of expand their territory from there.
it's a smart strategy.
Yeah, that's a really smart strategy.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
When a startup is looking to decouple, how do they even know where to start?
That's where identifying the weak link comes in.
Okay.
This is the activity that customers are most unhappy with,
Uh-huh.
the one that's causing the most friction or frustration.
Yeah. Think of it like this.
If the customer value chain is a chain of paper clips, the weak link is the one that's bent out of shape,
Right.
making it difficult to connect to the other links smoothly.
So finding that weak link is essential
It's crucial.
for successful decoupling.
Absolutely. Professor Teixeira highlights a company called PillPack
Okay.
as a fantastic example of this.
Mm-hmm.
They recognized a major weak link in how people, particularly the elderly,
Oh, yeah.
get their medications.
Interesting.
It's not just about buying the pills.
Right.
It's about the whole process of organizing them,
Yeah.
remembering to take them,
Uh-huh.
managing multiple medications.
Yeah.
And this is especially challenging for elderly patients who might be managing multiple medications with complex dosages.
Right.
So they saw an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives.
So it's not even just about convenience. It's about addressing a real need,
Exactly.
especially for a specific part of the population.
Precisely.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But didn't PillPack end up getting acquired by Amazon?
They did.
So doesn't that mean the established players kind of won in the end?
Well, that's an interesting point, and it highlights a key insight from Professor Teixeira.
Okay.
PillPack's success wasn't about staying independent forever.
Okay.
It was about recognizing a weak link that traditional pharmacies were structurally unable to address.
Mm-hmm.
Their disruption forced the industry to adapt.
Gotcha.
In this case, Amazon acquired them to gain access to their innovative model.
So even if a startup doesn't become like a giant,
Right.
like an Uber or a Netflix,
Exactly.
their disruption can still have a major impact.
Absolutely. Disruption is about changing the game,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily winning it outright.
Yeah. Okay, this is all starting to make sense to me now.
Good.
Find the weak link.
Decouple it.
Decouple it.
Offer a better solution.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It sounds simpler than it is.
Yeah, it's going to say.
Professor Teixeira cautions that just because a startup disrupts an industry
Mm-hmm.
doesn't guarantee profitability.
Right.
You can have a brilliant idea.
A fantastic solution,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can't make money,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a sustainable business.
So you need to be able to actually monetize
Yeah,
the solution.
Founders have to test,
Uh-huh.
learn, and sometimes even pivot their business models
Wow.
to find one that delivers value to customers and captures value for the business.
So there's a lot of experimentation involved.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It's not always a sure thing,
It's not,
which I guess is part of what makes it
right,
both risky and exciting.
for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how this all comes together.
It is.
I feel like we've laid a really solid foundation here,
We have.
but I think I'm ready to dive a little deeper
Me too.
into like the nitty-gritty
Let's do it.
of how to actually engineer
Yeah.
this disruption.
Well, Professor Teixeira provides a 5-step process
Okay.
for successful decoupling.
Awesome.
And I think it's time we unpack those steps. Let's do it.
Ah,
Okay, so let's get tactical official. Professor Teixeira lays out this 5-step process
he does.
for successful decoupling, and he uses PillPack as a case study.
Right.
It's really fascinating to see how these concepts actually
Right.
play out.
Yeah, PillPack is a perfect illustration
Yeah.
because it really highlights how a deep understanding of the customer value chain can lead to truly disruptive innovation.
So step 1 is to map the customer value chain,
Right.
which sounds pretty straightforward.
It is.
But like, what does that actually look like in practice?
So it's all about understanding the customer journey.
Okay.
In PillPack's case, they looked at the entire process of getting prescription medications,
Okay.
from the initial doctor's visit to the moment the patient actually takes their pills.
Okay.
They didn't just focus on the pharmacy transaction itself.
Right.
They zoomed out to see the whole picture,
So it's really about like all the steps involved
every single step.
in that whole process.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got this map of the customer journey now. What?
Okay, so step 2 is where you start to analyze that map.
Okay.
Professor Teixeira says you need to classify each activity as either value creating,
Okay.
value capturing, or value eroding.
So just to recap for our listeners,
Yeah.
value creating activities are the things that customers actually enjoy or benefit from.
Right.
Value capturing is how the business makes money.
Uh-huh.
And value eroding activities are the parts of the process that customers just find annoying.
Exactly. And this step is crucial.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to look at the customer value chain from multiple perspectives.
Right.
You're considering what's good for the customer, what's good for the business,
Yeah.
and what's just creating friction.
So you're basically going through your map like link by link
Link by links.
and labeling each activity.
That's right.
I imagine this could get pretty detailed.
It can.
Yeah, was it obvious to PillPack which activities fell into which category?
While some are more straightforward than others,
Real-
for example, the act of taking the medication
Okay.
and experiencing the health benefits,
Uh.
that's clearly value creating for the customer,
Right.
but other activities might be less clear-cut.
Yeah.
That's where the real analysis comes in.
All right, so we've mapped the chain, we've categorized each activity.
Right.
What's the next move in this disruption game?
Step 3 is where the magic happens.
Okay.
Identifying the weak link.
Gotcha.
This is the activity that customers are most unhappy with,
Uh-huh.
the one that's ripe for disruption.
How did PillPack pinpoint that specific weak link?
So they identified a pain point that was often overlooked by traditional pharmacies.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily the act of buying the medication itself,
Mm-hmm.
but rather the whole process of managing those medications,
Okay.
organizing all those pills, remembering to take them on schedule, dealing with refills, and so on.
Right.
This is especially challenging for elderly patients
Yeah.
who might be managing multiple medications with complex dosages.
So it wasn't just about convenience, it was about addressing like a real need,
Exactly.
especially for a certain segment of the population.
Precisely.
Okay, so they found the weak link that bent out of shape paperclip in the chain.
Uh-huh.
Now what do they do?
So step 4 is to decouple that activity,
Oh,
to snap off that weak link and replace it with something stronger.
okay.
In PillPack's case, they created their pre-sorted, pre-packaged medication system.
Mm-hmm.
They took that pain point, that frustration,
Right.
and they owned it.
And that's really what set them apart from those traditional pharmacies, right?
Absolutely.
It wasn't just selling pills, it was offering a solution
A solution.
to a problem that nobody else was addressing.
Exactly. And by decoupling that activity,
Yeah.
they created a whole new value proposition that was incredibly appealing to customers, especially those who are struggling with medication management.
So it's fascinating how they turned a weakness in the existing system into their strength.
Right.
But there's one more step in Professor Teixeira's framework, right?
Yes. Step 5 is all about anticipating and preempting the incumbent's response.
Okay.
In other words, once you disrupt an industry,
Uh-huh.
the established players aren't just going to sit back and watch you steal their customers.
Right, they're going to fight back.
They're going to fight back.
So you can't just like rest on your laurels.
No,
You have to think ahead
you have to be proactive.
and plan for how you're going to defend that territory.
Exactly.
But didn't PillPack get acquired by Amazon?
They did.
Wouldn't that be considered like a win for the incumbents?
It's an interesting outcome,
Yeah.
and it highlights an important nuance of disruption.
Okay.
PillPack's disruption was so effective that it forced the industry to adapt.
Okay.
Even if that adaptation meant acquiring the disruptor,
Right.
in a way, their acquisition by Amazon validates the power of their initial insight.
So it's like they shook things up so much
Yeah.
that the big players had to take notice and respond.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's pretty impressive.
It is.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
A lot.
We've mapped the value chain.
Yeah.
We found the weak link.
Yep.
Decoupled it, and even thought about how to defend against the competition.
We have.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But I feel like we're starting to see the world through a disruptor's lens.
You're getting it.
Yeah. But there's one more element we need to consider,
What's that?
and that's artificial intelligence.
Yes, AI.
AI is everywhere these days.
It is everywhere.
And it's having a profound impact on how businesses operate and how customers behave.
It really is.
Professor Teixeira talks about using AI strategically.
Strategically, that's the key word.
Yeah, we can't just throw AI at every problem
Right.
and expect it to work magic.
It's not a magic bullet.
It's a tool.
It is.
And like any tool, it needs to be used thoughtfully and purposefully.
I agree. Professor Teixeira suggests that AI is most effective
Oh.
when it's used to address customer pain points
Hmm.
by making things cheaper, faster, or easier.
Think about chatbots.
Oh,
Have you noticed how they're becoming more and more sophisticated?
I have.
Like able to handle these basic inquiries?
Yeah.
And even resolve simple issues without human intervention.
It's amazing how far they've come.
I used to dread getting stuck in those chatbot loops.
Oh, yeah. Those were the days.
But now they're actually pretty helpful.
They can be.
I guess that's AI in action, right?
It is.
Improving the customer experience by taking care of those routine tasks.
That's a great example. AI is being used to streamline all sorts of processes.
Yeah.
From personalizing product recommendations
Okay.
to optimizing logistics and delivery.
Wow.
It's even being used to detect fraudulent activity,
Right.
making online transactions safer for everyone.
So AI can be this really powerful tool for decoupling,
It can.
especially when it's used to eliminate those value-eroding activities
Yeah.
that create friction for customers.
Like removing the bumps in the road.
Like AI is the WD-40
I like that analogy.
of the customer value chain.
It captures the essence
Yeah, smoothing out those rough spots.
of how AI can enhance the customer experience.
But we have to remember that it's not a silver bullet.
It's not.
It needs to be applied strategically,
Absolutely.
always with the customer in mind.
Always.
Okay, so we've covered the 5 steps of decoupling.
We have.
We've explored the role of AI.
We did.
I'm feeling pretty energized, like I could go out and disrupt an industry myself.
I feel it too.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to ground these concepts in some real-world examples.
I agree. Professor Teixeira provides some fantastic case studies
Okay?
of companies that have successfully used these principles
Perfect.
to shake things up.
Let's see how these abstract concepts translate into actual business success.
Let's do it.
All right, so welcome back. We've explored the customer value chain. We've talked about the types of decoupling, the 5 steps to successful disruption, and even touched on the role of AI.
Phew, that's a lot.
Yeah, right. But now it's time to see these concepts play out in the real world with some examples from Professor Teixeira.
Yeah, I love seeing how these abstract ideas turn into real businesses that are out there changing the game.
Totally. And our first example is one we've already talked about quite a bit, Uber.
Uber.
Such a classic example of decoupling in action.
It really is a textbook case.
So Uber saw that the traditional taxi industry had a major weak link, that process of hailing a cab or calling a dispatcher.
It was so inefficient.
Oof, yeah, and unreliable.
Frustrating.
Standing on a street corner in the rain trying to flag down a cab is not a fun experience.
Nope.
So Uber swooped in and decoupled that whole activity with their app-based platform.
Yeah, they just connected riders and drivers, directly cut out the middleman.
Made it so much smoother.
Right, for both sides.
And it wasn't just about convenience. They were often cheaper than traditional taxis, too.
Yeah, they were hitting on multiple pain points at once. Convenience, reliability, costs?
No wonder they grew so quickly.
It's a textbook example of how identifying and addressing a weak link can lead to massive disruption.
Totally. And they didn't stop there.
No, they didn't.
They moved into food delivery with Uber Eats, package delivery, even freight transport.
It's that coupling in action, right?
Yeah, they established that beachhead and then expanded.
Built out that ecosystem.
So smart.
Let's switch gears and talk about another company that really mastered decoupling.
Yeah.
Netflix.
Netflix, I mean, they completely changed how we watch movies and TV shows.
For sure.
Remember those days of going to the video rental store?
Browsing through those endless shelves.
Hoping they had the movie you wanted.
And then you had to return it on time or you get hit with those late fees.
This was such a hassle.
Such a hassle.
So what was that weak link that Netflix identified?
Well, they saw that the entire process of renting physical movies was just riddled with friction.
Yeah.
It was inconvenient, time-consuming, and often frustrating.
So what did they do?
They decoupled that whole value-eroding activity by creating their subscription-based streaming service.
Right.
Gave customers instant access to a huge library of movies and TV shows right from home.
So convenient.
No more trips to the store, no more late fees. Just endless entertainment at your fingertips.
It was revolutionary.
Yeah.
And then they started producing their own original content, too.
Yeah.
Disrupting Hollywood.
Went from distributor to creator.
Old move.
It was risky, but it paid off.
Big time.
They recognized that the traditional way of making and distributing content was ripe for disruption.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to see how these companies were able to find those weak links and turn them into these incredible successes.
It shows that with a little ingenuity and a deep understanding of the customer, you can create groundbreaking businesses.
And these principles can be applied to any industry at any scale.
Doesn't matter if you're a big company or a startup.
It's all about finding those weak links and figuring out how to make things better, more efficient, more valuable for the customer.
The world is full of weak links just waiting to be decoupled.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this.
Okay.
Keep an eye out for those opportunities.
Yeah.
What are the things that frustrate you? What processes seem clunky or outdated?
Yeah.
Those are the places where disruption can
The
happen.
next big disruption could come from anywhere.
It could come from you.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of digital disruption.
Until next time, keep those entrepreneurial wheels turning.